It is my pleasure to introduce our speakers today. We have Amelia White, who serves as the Director of Donor Engagement at Communities Foundation of Texas, overseeing the administration and execution of donor services stewardship efforts and building relationships with fund holders to deepen and enhance their charitable giving experience. Prior to joining Communities Foundation of Texas in 2015, Amelia was a category director at Heritage Auctions and began her career in government affairs in Washington, D.C. She holds a bachelor's degree in business and psychology from Sweetbriar College, and she studied at the University of Westminster in the UK and the University of Seville in Spain. Amelia also volunteers as a court-appointed special advocate with Dallas CASA, a board member of Faith Commons, a host committee member for the Big Tex Champion Club of the State Fair of Texas, and a member of the advocacy committee at her church. We are also joined by Boski Sharma. Boski serves as a donor relations officer at the Communities Foundation of Texas. In her role, Boski works closely with individuals and families in meeting their charitable goals by strategically connecting their values and interests to the community needs for a lasting impact. After several years of working in the retail industry, Boski made a deliberate transition into the nonprofit world to follow her passion to give back and help others by creating opportunities for all. Boski holds a dual master's degree, an MBA, and a master's in arts management from Southern Methodist University. As a passionate advocate for local nonprofits, Boski serves on the boards of Children's Chorus of Greater Dallas and Dallas Black Dance Theater. She co-chaired Dallas Black Dance Theater's inaugural annual gala, Big Dance, in 2019. She cares deeply about helping students realize their true potential and loves teaching as a guest lecturer at SMU. Now, before I turn the mic over to our guest speakers, I would like to also mention that we will have a Q&A section at the end of the program. So if you have questions for our guest speakers, please type them in the chat box. And at the end of the program, we will go through those questions. Thank you. Take it away.
Thank you so much, Rachel, for this lovely introduction. We are really, really excited to be here today, and we are incredibly thankful for this wonderful opportunity that you have given us to be here today. We have a great lineup of topics with some wonderful, insightful stats to share with you. Certainly this year has been tough, but if we look at the bright side, the generosity of our community is truly remarkable. The charitable contributions from donors like you have been powering the COVID relief efforts and providing critical support to people in need. Today in this session, we will cover the basic building blocks for charitable giving, starting from creating your personal giving plan, understanding different ways to give, learning about various giving vehicles offered by foundations like CFT and other financial institutions, donor advised funds, understanding what are they, how they work, and what makes them such a powerful giving vehicle in the nation. We will also discuss international grant making process to support causes and nonprofits outside US. And last but not the least, how to build a legacy through giving. Before we begin to dive deeper into these topics, I would love to share a little bit more about who we are and what we do. The Communities Foundation of Texas, or as we like to call it, CFT, was founded in 1953. We are a tax-exempt public charity and function like a charitable bank to help facilitate giving. Individuals, families, and businesses open their charitable funds with us so they can support various causes and nonprofits of their choice. As one of the largest community foundations in the nation, we strive to make giving easy, effective, and enjoyable. Our mission is to build thriving communities for all, where on one end, we thoughtfully support our diverse donors and their charitable funds by providing exemplary service. On the other hand, we work with nonprofits and make sure that community needs are met in the most effective manner. So the best way to understand our role is to see us as matchmakers who help to connect the values and interests of donors with the community needs for a lasting impact. Since its inception, CFT has granted over $2 billion through more than 1,000 charitable funds to support thousands of nonprofits. Since March this year, we have helped mobilize over $175 million for nonprofits through various community relief efforts and donor-driven funds. I would love to share one of my favorite quotes by Eleanor Roosevelt because it perfectly embodies what we do. Since you get more joy out of giving to others, you should put a good deal of thought into the happiness that you are able to give. Isn't that like insightful? At CFT, we bring people from diverse backgrounds and cultures together through giving and make life better for those who need it the most. Charitable giving is not a question of if you should give. It's a question of where and how. When I talk to people like my friends, my family, and my network of people that I know, I usually hear that they want to help and they want to give, but they don't know how. And we are here today to help you with where and how of giving. How can you make your charitable giving more effective? By following a planned strategic approach to achieve measurable results and lasting impact. The first step in this process is to create a personal giving plan for yourself and your family. Creating a personal giving plan helps you get a clear idea of why do you give, what do you want to achieve, how to do so, and where to give. Most of the time, we give in a piecemeal fashion as we see a need in the community or when we receive an appeal letter from a nonprofit or a friend asks us to support a particular cause, which becomes more of an honored obligation or reactive giving versus a well thought through gift with a meaning. When you create a personal giving plan, it challenges you to think critically, empowers you to say yes or no, or be selective depending on whether a cause is aligned well with your interest or not. So what goes into a personal giving plan? First, we start with why and what, which involves identifying your core values and passions that motivate you to give. Once you recognize your top 3 to 4 values, you can create a personal giving statement in simple 1 or 2 sentences that captures your giving philosophy, highlighting your area of interest, issues, population, or even the place or geographic area you want to focus on. I would love to share my example with you. I value courage, equity, community, which motivates me to give to causes that help create opportunities for people with limited access and resources. Based on these values, my mission statement is that I will support quality education for young girls and women by funding programs that remove barriers and provide equitable access and opportunities for them in North Texas as well as in India. So in this statement, as you can see, I captured my area of interest, which is quality education, the population or segment I want to serve, that's young girls and women. The issue I want to focus on is to remove barriers and provide equitable access and opportunities, and the location for impact is North Texas in India. So having this statement keeps my focus in place on priorities and would prevent me from getting distracted. By writing down your giving statement in this manner, you can clearly pinpoint why do you give and what do you want to achieve. Once you have your mission statement ready, you can also create a monthly or annual charitable budget, capturing the proposed donation amounts and gift frequency. Having a charitable budget will help you stay on course. It will give you a clear visibility of what you can truly afford and will also help you budget for taxes, which is very important. The next step in this process is how to give. For that, you need to select the charitable giving vehicle that best suits your vision and financial situation. And Amelia will cover these vehicles in her portion of the presentation later. Once you figure out why, what, and how, it gets really, really easy. You can then decide on where to give. You can choose a nonprofit you want to support based on your giving statement and start doing the good work. At CFT, we shepherd our donors through all these different steps to help them create their personal giving plan and guide them through their grant making strategies based on their mission statement. I will include some resources in the chat for you that you can use to research nonprofits, conduct due diligence, and make sure that they are in good standing before you make your gift. Also, United Nations Sustainable Development Goals could be a good reference point as you're identifying the areas of interest and issues for your giving statement. We also offer small group sessions at CFT to help people build their personal giving plan. So you can always reach out to us if you're interested in this service. Currently, we are offering virtual sessions to maintain social distancing, but I will include the contact link in the chat. If you're interested, feel free to reach out to us. For the longest time, I had this perception that giving is always through money. And I know many people feel this way too. But in reality, there are many ways to give and help the community. Empirically, the gifts that have the most impact are fewer, bigger, longer, with higher donor involvement in terms of time and influence. It can be a gift of your time through volunteering. It could be a gift of talent through board or committee service or through pro bono work, or it can be a gift of your voice or network through advocacy. You can combine these different approaches in multiple different permutation and combinations to achieve better results and greater impact. And truly, the combination of these gifts is what makes giving fun and rewarding. My little tip here is when you create your charitable giving budget, you should also consider including the time or talent giving through volunteering or through pro bono work, because it becomes a comprehensive giving plan when you are including your time and your talent involvement as well. So if you're planning to volunteer on a monthly or quarterly basis at the food bank or homeless shelter, add the proposed number of hours and frequency in your budget along with the dollar amounts so you can see the full picture of your giving across all these different approaches. In the chat, I will include a few links to the virtual volunteer opportunities that you can easily do with your family and with your coworkers during this holiday season. Feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions. And with that, I will pass it to my wonderful colleague, Amelia White, who will walk you through the different week of international grant making process and building a legacy. Thank you.
Thanks, Boski. It is my pleasure to get to speak with all of you today about the more technical side of giving financially and some of the easy tools donors use to bring strategy to their giving. But before I do, I just wanted to reiterate again what Boski was saying about all the ways to give beyond financial giving. So while at CFT we work with our donors to help them with their financial giving, we also focus on helping them round out their giving in ways that are meaningful to them. So whether that's through helping to find volunteer board service opportunities or thinking about how they can support nonprofits in other ways, we love helping donors find what they're passionate about and then get connected to those charities. So a lot of what Boski was talking about is the type of work that we do with our fund holders who come to CFT for support in every part of their philanthropic journey. So what we're hoping to illustrate for you all today is how charitable giving can become part of your overall financial planning. So we want this to be part of everything that you think about when you think about your finances in total. So here we've got some charitable gift vehicles. This is the full spectrum of what people can do to give to charity. A lot of people give directly to the nonprofits. You can create a charitable fund like we're going to talk about today with donor advised funds or scholarships. Some people establish a charitable trust with a specific organization, and then some create their own private foundations, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But at CFT, we offer several types of charitable funds, business advised funds for companies who want to have a focused strategy for their corporate giving or to engage their employees in volunteering, scholarship funds, obviously to support education for individuals, designated funds to support specific organizations or interest areas, but by far the most popular and the fastest growing and the most flexible is the donor advised fund. So what are donor advised funds? We're going to talk about them for most of the rest of the program. DAFs, as we call them, is the acronym. And forgive me, I'll say DAF probably too many times today, but I'll try to say donor advised funds. They're charitable funds opened at a public charity like a community foundation that work like a charitable checking account. So they help bring structure and giving to your giving plan. Structure, I should say, structure and focus to your giving plan. When you contribute cash, securities, or other assets to a donor advised fund at a public charity, you're eligible for an immediate tax benefit. The funds are then invested by the foundation and they grow tax-free. And then donors can determine how those funds are distributed to charities. So that's where the donor advised part comes in. Donor advised funds, they're the fastest growing charitable giving vehicle in the United States because they're one of the easiest and the most tax advantageous ways to give to charity. And I think the primary reason people choose donor advised funds at community foundations over commercial gift funds like Fidelity or Schwab, those companies have opened up foundations so that they can administer donor advised funds. But I think the reason people come to community foundations is because of how we work with donors on what Boski was describing earlier, our connection to community, our support in helping individuals build that charitable plan or legacy. And then one other thing I'll say is a common misconception is that you have to be wealthy to have a donor advised fund, but it's just not the case. Our minimum to open a DAF is $5,000, and that's not a balance that must be maintained. That can be granted out and replenished over time. It's very flexible. So how do they work? Boski, if we can go back to the slide before this, we've got an illustration of the flow. I think there we go. So like I said, they help people organize their giving. The donors will establish a fund at the foundation, and then that foundation will invest those funds at the direction of the donor. So at CFT, we have 6 different investment options from which donors can choose. And then we'll work with that donor to help advise them. Some come to us with nonprofits that they know they want to support. Others are looking for more guidance from us. If they've got an interest area that they know they want to focus on, but they don't know exactly which nonprofits are doing the great work in that area, that's when they'll come to CFT and we'll provide that advice and that guidance. And then when they're ready, they'll make those grants. And so the foundation, on behalf of the donor, will make those grants out to the nonprofit. It's just a great way for people to get started in structuring their giving. So when it comes to the benefits, many of my donors give to multiple nonprofits, both locally and nationally. And I think what they like about their donor advised fund is when they make their financial gift into their fund, that's when they receive that charitable tax benefit. So even if they don't have an idea of exactly where those funds are going, which nonprofit recipients will get those funds, they can make a charitable contribution and then make those grant determinations later. So they tell us that where those grants will go, we'll make the grants on their behalf, and they don't have to chase down all of those tax receipts from those various nonprofits when it comes time to file their taxes. So they just submit that maybe one gift to their fund that year. That's what they use on their taxes. And then all of the other, as far as the donations go, we handle that. So I think at some point, Boski's going to drop in the chat more information on our donor advised funds. It's just one example of the reason donors love DAFs. We've got a couple other reasons listed here. You can build funds over time. You don't have to grant the funds out within a specific time frame. So if you want to make contributions to the fund and then grow it over time, you can do it in that way. Like I mentioned earlier, we have at CFT, we have 6 different investment options that donors can choose for their fund. So those funds can grow tax-free in that way as well. People also use them because you can give anonymously, which is a nice benefit. And I think more than anything, people come to the Community Foundation to open donor advised funds because they want to be connected to the community and they want to be supported by the foundation and in the ways Boski described earlier, and be among a community of givers. So obviously you can give cash to donor advised funds, but we also have options for non-cash assets. Let's see, we've got it coming up here. Anything from closely held or restricted stock, oil, gas, and mineral rights, gifts of life insurance, retirement plans, in some cases, even real estate or personal property. They're a great way, donor advised funds are a great way to liquidate different types of assets for a charitable purpose. So as you can imagine, donor advised funds are becoming more and more popular because of how easy they are to set up and to use. We have data here from 2018. Gifts into, this is nationwide, gifts into donor advised funds in 2018 totaled more than $37 billion. And grants from those DAFs to nonprofits exceeded $23 billion in that year. And then just in 2020 alone, more than $1 billion has been granted out to donor advised funds to support and to respond to this COVID-19 crisis that we're all seeing right now. I know at CFT we've seen a significant increase in grants being made this year to help support our own community and our community's tremendous needs right now. So I'll move on to private foundations. We can touch on this. I've got a lot of detail here on this slide and we'll share this after, but a question we often get is what are the differences between donor advised funds and private foundations? And then what are the benefits of one over the other? My answer is usually that donor advised funds offer the same ability to invest the funds and support nonprofits, but they offer a little more flexibility without the administrative burden of the private foundation. And when I say private foundation, I'm thinking of those private charities that are set up by families. Often you'll see maybe athletes or celebrities create them, but those are private charities. And they're different from a public charity like a community foundation. Private foundations they require a lot more than certain donor advised funds. They require appointed board members, IRS reporting, liability and risk insurance. They've got firm requirements for annual payouts. The income tax deductions are not as significant. So community foundations handle all of that administrative burden for the donor advised funds. So our fund holders serve as advisors. They can name successor advisors, so adult children or loved ones that they want to either grant with them when they become of age or to take over the fund or the grant making from the fund after the donor's passing. But we handle all of that administrative work, so donors get all the benefit of that foundation without the headache of having to administer it. So our donor advised funds, one other point, they range from anywhere from 5,000 all the way up to the tens of millions. So a lot of these families who are considering, maybe they've got a sizable amount and they're considering open a private foundation, we're seeing more and more of them come to community foundations to open donor advised funds, just so that they can have things a little more streamlined. So we've got a slide on scholarship funds. I can talk about that. We talked a lot about donor advised funds, but scholarship funds are another great way for people to give back. They can be structured to benefit students at any education level, so adults or high school students, college students at any institution. We see families establishing them to create a legacy or honor a loved one, or to give back to their community or to support their alma mater. And we work with donors to create kind of their own unique scholarships. So the most recent scholarship we opened was to help, a family came to us and wanted to help students in the Vickery Meadow community in Dallas, and specifically students who were high achievers, but would be first generation college students. And I got to sit, and Boski and I both, we got to sit on the selection committee this spring. And I can't tell you how powerful it is to see these kids' lives changed through financial support for their education. So it's one of the best things we do. We love our scholarship funds and we love to get to see the charitable impact firsthand. So international grant making, I can touch on this a little bit. We get this question from time to time. We do help fund holders make international grants to support initiatives in other countries. As you can imagine, it's a little more nuanced than regular grant making, but it's certainly possible. Many of the international nonprofits we work with or that fund holders want to support actually have a domestic entity through which they can accept funding. So that makes it nice and easy. But other times, if it's a smaller nonprofit that's working in a specific country, we'll have to go through a little bit more of a rigorous process with a higher level of due diligence to make those grants. But it's certainly something we can do. And we love to see those impacts, the impact that those grants can make. So lastly, I will just touch on legacy. It's one of our favorite quotes: "The true meaning of life is to plant trees under whose shade you do not expect to sit." And so in addition to passing assets on to loved ones, your will or your trust can also be used to help define your charitable legacy. Donor advised funds can accept all the gifts that I named earlier, gift types that I named earlier, but they can also accept gifts through charitable trusts, through charitable gift annuities, bequests, honorary and memorial gifts. But beyond the types of gifts we can accept into donor advised funds, I think, and Boski would say this too, we think the most important thing to consider is what type of legacy you want to leave. And to start thinking through that, I don't think it's ever too early to start thinking about what legacy you want to leave in this world. And that's one of the things that we really love working. We love working on this with our fund holders. We consider it a true honor to be able to work with them, to help them in their determination of what their charitable funds do after their lifetime. So I know I moved through this pretty quickly, but I hope you have a sense now for what we do at CFT, how we work with our donors, and how to bring strategy to your giving. So, back to Rachel for the Q&A.
Thank you, Amelia. Thank you, Boski. That was very informative. I loved the high level and then getting into the details as well. That was very helpful. So thank you both kindly. For our audience, we are going to open it up to Q&A. So this is your opportunity. If you have specific questions that you would like answered, please just type them in the chat box and we'll be asking them of our panelists. And while y'all are typing those in, we'll go ahead and I've got a few questions that I want to know more about based on the presentation. So we talked a little bit about doing a donor advised fund or, doing a foundation, doing different things. Where do I start? Like, do I call Communities Foundation of Texas and say, I would like to start a process and you help guide me? Or what is the very first step I take? Boski?
Yeah, that's a great question. Absolutely, you can connect with someone at Communities Foundation of Texas. I would be happy to help you, and I will leave my contact information at the end so that you can always reach out to me, or you can reach out to Amelia, and we can guide you to the right experts. If you're just trying to set up like kind of a planning, giving, just a basic giving planning with us, we can do that initial consultancy, and then based on your interest and needs, we can guide you to the right experts. So yes, absolutely, connecting with us would be the right step to get your process started for giving.
Thank you. I'm seeing that there are some questions in the chat now, so I'm going to ask from our audience. One person wants to know, could you speak to strategies for how to measure your impact? That's a good question. How do we know that our funds are making the impact we want them to?
Yeah, absolutely. We actually have a great team at CFT, and they are very involved in making sure that they are identifying the right KPIs or key performance indicators to measure our performance throughout the year. And we measure it in so many different ways. We look at the grants that we are making out in the community and what kind of grants are we making, what kind of cause areas that's causing an impact on. We also work really closely with our nonprofits to get their feedback on a regular basis to kind of understand how those grants are making difference in their lives and in their organizations. So there are a lot of different ways we do that on a regular basis. We also keep an account of all the DAF grants that are going out and kind of see donors, what kind of causes that they are advancing to. So that way we have stats and results both on the donor side as well as on the grantee side. And Amelia, feel free to add if there is something that I missed to include in our KPIs that we usually use to measure our performance.
No, I think that's great, Boski. I mean, a lot of, we work with our philanthropy team also, to see how those grants are performing with these nonprofits. And one of the things we'll do is we'll work with a donor if they're interested in funding a specific program or a specific initiative with a nonprofit. We're happy to be the go-between to help facilitate that those grants and working closely with the nonprofits on fund impact reporting. So that's something that we can provide as a service. Just wanted to add that, but great answer, Boski.
Thank you both. We have another question here that is about creating a donor advised fund with a group of people. So the question is, can groups create a donor advised fund? For example, can I create a fund with my family or friends? Can we all contribute to the same funds and receive the tax benefits for our individual contributions?
You want to take that, Boski? And I can add to it?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. So yes, you can create donor advised funds with your family. You can identify your advisors, like secondary advisors and successors to it. So that's one way to do it, where your family can contribute to your donor advised funds, as well as they can also help with decisions related to grant making and which nonprofits you want to support. In addition to that, I know I have received some requests in the past where we can create a giving page for your donor advised fund. And through that giving page, you can invite your circle of extended family members and friends so they can also make donations to that donor advised fund. And then when they make their donation through that giving page online to the DAF, they will get an automatic tax receipt, which is generated, in an email. So it's a pretty easy process. But Amelia, feel free to add like some of the things that you have observed in the past from your experience working with donors.
Sure. So we see this happen a lot. Families will come together and decide that they have they've got funds that they want to give. They each want to be able to have their own tax benefit for gifts into the fund, but they want to have something that's kind of gathering the funds and then granting them out. And then they'll work together kind of as a team to determine how those grants are made. We see that from time to time, and it's great. We also, we've got groups that'll come to us to say it kind of forms a smaller giving circle. So a group of individuals with a similar interest. I know we've got a couple of good examples of that, where individuals will come together because they have that interest, that shared interest, and have that pretty well defined, and then make grants in that way. So, yep, we see that quite a bit.
Excellent. It's nice to know that you can do that. You can join forces with your family or friends and make a bigger impact. We have a question here.
One other example. One other quick thing.
Sure.
We've had a couple of funds recently, couples who've gotten married and used those funds, their donors advised funds, as a way to gift charitably. And so family members will, instead of maybe giving them a wedding gift, will make a gift, a financial gift into their donor advised fund, knowing that the donors will be the advisors to how those grants are made, but to support them in their charitable giving, which we think is a sweet example. We've seen that a couple of times now. And so
it's a wonderful way to get your married life started.
Yeah.
That's really nice. But we have another question here. It says, what are the greatest needs in our community in 2020? And what are the greatest needs in our community in general that are not related to COVID? I'm sure COVID is probably the greatest need, but beyond that, what are the other needs we're seeing in our community?
Emily, you want to take this one?
Sure. Yeah. So I was going to say, in 2020, our focus has been, since March, it's been such a strong focus on COVID. I know we have North Texas Cares, this initiative that's created with a group of funders to be able to support basic needs and immediate needs in the community. So we've spent a lot of time and a lot of grant making through that, and then also through our donors who are addressing COVID. But then there are also, as we saw in 2020, especially at the beginning, all nonprofits have been affected by COVID. So even if they're not offering, basic services, or they're not on the front lines, our art nonprofits are being impacted. And across the board, we saw giving kind of decrease there for a minute when there was so much uncertainty. And so they were affected across the board. A lot of issues, big issues in North Texas. One of the things that we focus on at CFT is working families, so the working poor, and helping to create a system and a network of nonprofits that are able to support these families as they're working. Boski, you have anything you want to add as far as kind of some of the big issues in North Texas?
Yeah, I think it's hard to extract those out from COVID-related efforts because they are so intermingled. I feel like throughout this year, like the health is definitely a big concern, and economic security. That's another one, because a lot of our families are struggling right now, whether it's like the food shortage or employment, losing their jobs. So I feel like they have been really interconnected this year. And we can't really just focus on one, not looking at the COVID, because, you know, it's kind of, that's how it is this year. But we have some great relief efforts that we put into work this year. Like we had some like 8 to 9 specific funds that we opened just to provide relief to our community during this difficult time. And they all are catering to multiple different causes related to job opportunities and economic security, food shortage, health, learning, online learning. That has been a huge cause that we have been helping in our community this year. So yeah, the need is always there for sure.
Yeah, and just add on to that through Educate Texas, one of the larger programs we run at CFT, just that impact, that just focusing on the impact COVID has had on our learning communities and how students are able to access online learning and what that looks like. So a big focus for this year for sure.
And
all of that was COVID related, but I know that wasn't exactly the question, but that's where our focus is.
Yes. And you know, with pandemic, it has really brought into light the gaps that we have in our community, you know, the social gaps and social issues. So I think because of pandemic, those issues have come into light, and now we are working on making sure that all students have equitable access to education through online platforms and through quality education.
Right.
All right. Well, our next question is, how would you suggest to create engagement with new donors? And I'm not sure if this is a person from another charity who's saying like, how do we get more donors in this time? Or if it's, you know, if I become a donor, how do I stay engaged with the process? But maybe we could take it from both perspectives.
Yeah, sure. So I think, you know, as one of the things we haven't really talked about is North Texas Giving Day. I know Boski put in the chat some of that information, but that's one of the ways that we find that nonprofits are trying to reach new donors is by participating in North Texas Giving Day. And I'm looking at this question here and wondering if this individual is with a nonprofit and they may participate in North Texas Giving Day. I think we had it was over 3,000 nonprofits in DFW that participated this year and cumulatively raised over $58 million in a short period in September. So that's one way to kind of get your name out and to reach a broader audience of new donors. Yeah, Boski.
Yeah, and I know we have been doing a lot of great work at CFT right now to reach out to wider community, working with different minority communities, you know, whether it's Asian Americans or Hispanic community or, you know, our Black community. And we are making really strong efforts to broaden that outreach and connecting with people in the most organic, authentic manner as we can. I know we have just recently forged some great partnerships, whether it's US-India Chamber of Commerce or whether it's Black Chamber of Commerce or Asian Chamber of Texas. And we are doing a lot of different community events through these different platforms so that we can have a better idea of what the real needs are in these different communities, and then we can cater to those needs the right way. So yeah, there's a lot of work that's happening right now behind the scene as well as out in the community to connect with new donors and tell them who we are and what we do and how the philanthropy landscape in the North Texas region can really help bringing more value and more impact across the board.
Thank you. We have another question here. This one is about donor advised funds. So it says, how do non-dispensed funds in a donor advised fund grow, and what is the typical growth rate?
Great. Yeah. So we have, like I mentioned in the presentation, we've got 6 different options, and they range all the way from some that are very aggressive and then some that are a little more conservative as far as the growth. So those growth rates vary among those 6 different selections. One of the things that we talk about is one of the things that we've added this year is a new option, or I say this year. This year has flown by. One of the things we added last year was our social impact investment fund. And so focusing on or investing with companies who have an high ESG rating. And so we've seen great performance from that. I think we've all been very, very pleased with what we've seen there. And so I'm happy to share that the information is on our website. We're also happy to share that as a follow-up, just kind of how those investment funds have performed.
And I wanted to bring some attention. Boski put this in the chat, but I wanted to talk about it a little bit because I think this is such important information. You put the links to some resources to researching nonprofits, GuideStar and Charity Navigator. Can you just tell our audience a little bit about what those organizations are and why they are important, why you might want to consult them?
Yeah, absolutely. So these two organizations, they basically keep a track of all the nonprofits in the nation, and they are also responsible for conducting due diligence on these nonprofits by looking at their financial reporting, IRS reporting annually. So if you go to any of these websites, whether it's GuideStar or Charity Navigator, you can actually put the name of your nonprofit. For example, I want to search, I'm just making this up, Dallas Black Dance Theater. So if you put that in, it will give you the profile for Dallas Black Dance Theater. Plus, you can also see their 990 forms and other IRS reporting documents. So that way you can see what kind of financial standing they are in, what is their contributed revenue, who's on their board, what are their expenses versus revenue. So that way you can have a little bit more understanding if this is an organization that's managing their resources properly. Are they credible? Is this an organization I want to associate myself with and would like to give money to? So it's a great way to kind of vet the nonprofits. So before you make your donation, you feel good that you're making a contribution to a credible organization.
Now, I think in the past, at least, they used to give letter grades to charities. Is there a letter grade below you think you would not give to a charity? Like how good do they need to be in order to be worthy of donations?
I don't know if they still have that. I haven't spent a ton of time on there. I know our grants team and our due diligence team focuses on that, but I'm not sure if they're still grading in that way or if they still have that. But I know that when we're looking at nonprofits, we're looking at, our philanthropy team does a really great assessment of nonprofits. They're looking at those financial documents, the 990s, staff, program costs, things like that. But then they're looking at what's actually happening, what kind of impact these nonprofits are having, or what efforts they're making, and evaluating in that way. So.
One of the little tips that I always like to share is always look at the program expenses and look at the administrative expenses, and making sure that administrative expenses are not overshooting your program expenses. Because if that's the case, usually it's like, what is going on, and that most of the money is going to the administration versus the program. So that's always kind of a little kind of an alarming sign when you're looking at a nonprofit. So that's why financials are important. So just keeping an eye on how they are using that donation on their programs is really, really critical. Administration is important too, but having that right ratio is extremely important.
Yeah, and I think to put a point on that, we want nonprofits, they obviously have to have administrative costs, and I think Boski's talking about is something that's out of balance, that's obvious, but we certainly expect nonprofits to have administrative costs and to be able to pay for a lot of these things, like, marketing is important, for nonprofits too, to be able to get their name out. So,
Well, and speaking of marketing, that is just a great segue to our next question, because they're asking, as a small nonprofit with a focus on education, are there any services through which you can refer us to find grants and foundations? So how do we as nonprofits find available resources?
Yeah, well, so I always encourage nonprofits to connect to community foundations and to connect to CFT. We have a discretionary funding process where we're able to evaluate nonprofits for funding in all different interest areas. And so I always encourage people to reach out, not only to CFT, but other area foundations, to see what kinds of grant funding processes they have running at any specific time, and just making connections and staying educated. As far as services, I'm not sure. One of our teammates on our philanthropy team might be able to answer that a little bit better. But Boski, do you have anything you'd want to add?
I think you pretty much covered everything, Amelia, on that point. I agree with you. But I'm sure our philanthropy team would definitely have a little bit more insight into that. But yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah, and I would say, I see Benedict, you asked that question, so feel free to contact either Boski or me after this, and we're happy to get connected and follow up.
Excellent. We have another question here. It says, what do you recommend to get your children involved with your donor advised fund? How do we get the children involved?
Great. Boski, why don't you take this one?
Sure. You know, I have a son who's 12 years old now, and I got him involved into philanthropy through CFT. I was not even working at CFT at that time, and we just started Sejal Desai, who works at CFT. She started this giving circle with Ami Doshi, who was also part of CFT at that time, South Asian Giving Circle. So I enrolled my son into the South Asian Giving Circle, and it was such a great experience for him. He was only like 10 years old, not even 10 at that time. And he really learned how the grants are made, how you review grant applications. They even interviewed nonprofits, their executive directors, and they went through their financials and figured all that out. Like, you know, I just thought it was such a great experience for kids. To understand how this grant making process works and what kind of nonprofits are out there doing these different kind of missions to help the community. And it's so interesting that as part of that process, we also introduced the value and passion exercise to our kids. And that was the first time my son kind of understood what values are, like, in a way, when he picked his value card. And that's exactly what I was talking about in my section of the presentation today, that you always start from your values and your passions. You identify those first, and then you create your mission statement, and then you move forward. So the same process you can do with your kids too. And I literally just did this process with a group of kids in my friend circle a couple of weeks ago. And I was blown away when I saw the values that those kids were picking, because some of them were just 8 years old and still this girl picked leadership. And I was blown away when she picked leadership and the way she explained it and how she wants to help other girls who want to be future leaders. So we are happy to guide you through that process, how you can do that with your kids at home in just a very comfortable setting. And we have resources, we have tools that we can share with you so that it just becomes really, really easy to get kids involved in this kind of good work.
Yeah, I'll just say we love, this is some of our favorite work that we get to do. And we're seeing more and more families come to us and engaging their kids at a really young age. I don't think it's ever really too early to start talking with kids. I mean, we've had 4-year-olds sitting at our boardroom table to have these conversations, and it's a lot of fun. We've also opened grandkids funds. Recently, we've had a few of those open where grandparents are nearing kind of the end of their life, but they want to make sure that they're sharing the spirit of giving with their family. And so they'll open these funds for their grandkids to make decisions on how those, to find nonprofits and then to make those grants and to work together. And it's a really sweet bonding experience. And like Boski said, we'll go through these exercises with the kids and it's just been a delight. So always happy to share more information about that.
We do have a follow-up question. I think that's related. It says, do you have any books or resources that you recommend to help get our kids more engaged in giving?
We do. We've got a couple of
books they can read, and
we do. We've got a couple of sweet books in our fund holder library that I can send the links out to after.
That would be great, because anything that makes the kids read too.
Sure.
Make them give and make them read at the same time.
The giving book is sweet. We have that, and then I'll send the link to you, Rachel, afterward. But
that sounds excellent. We have another question here. This is about volunteering during COVID. which complicates volunteering. So it says, do you have any thoughts on how we can continue to volunteer our time towards service projects during COVID?
That's great. I'll just say, I know every year we host a family service day around this time for the North Texas Food Bank, where we have families, fund holders and their families come and volunteer their time. And then friends of CFT, not even just fund holders, but to volunteer their time as a family and to demonstrate for their kids the importance of giving back. But then Boski, if you want to talk a little bit about this holiday volunteer or virtual volunteer guide that we have.
Yeah, I actually just shared in the chat, there are a few links for virtual volunteer opportunities. As Amelia said, there is one coming at the food bank, and then we also have a holiday guide where you can, to this link, you probably have to put your name and your contact information in to access the guide, but there are many different opportunities that you can do with your family. They're all family friendly, most of them, and there are some for older kids like 13 years and above, but then there are also few for younger kids. I know over the summer, I did a lot of virtual volunteer activities with my son using this guide where we did, just like encouragement cards for seniors at the senior source, storytelling, book reading for kids at different nonprofits. You can just literally make a video of yourself, and my son did that of a video where you're reading books, storybooks to younger kids. So that's another opportunity, since kids are not going to school and sometimes you feel like there's a learning gap happening. So you can help the kids fill up those learning gaps during this time. You can also do sweet messages for our healthcare workers and for our essential workers in the field. That's another thing you can do. So there are a lot of different options that you can go through, and you can pick that works the best for you.
Oh, thank you so much. It's so important to still stay connected, even during COVID. And it's hard, but these are good questions. Like, how can we keep giving? How can we volunteer and keep ourselves safe, but still be a part of our community? If you have any more questions, go ahead and put them in the chat. I'll give you a minute or two to do that. But while we're letting people do that, do you have any concluding thoughts you'd like to share with us, Boski or Amelia?
I just go back to what Boski had said, and then I reiterated earlier in my portion is giving is, we all think about financial giving. Giving is so much broader. And I think when we're thinking about what we can give at different times in our life, it's important to think of just the full spectrum of what that means. And so whether that's volunteer time or actually thinking about really the talents that we have as individuals and how we can offer those to nonprofits. And it goes, we talk a lot about financial giving, and CFT does a really good job, I think, of being that facilitator for that. But we also really love to focus and help people focus on their broader ability to give.
Thank you. That's so important. We have to keep looking at the big picture and seeing all that we can do. You're right. It's not just financial giving.
Right.
So thank you, Amelia.
Yeah.
Do we have any further questions? Okay, it looks like we have answered all the questions. So great job to both of our presenters. I know I've learned a ton today that I hope to take back. I actually really liked how you start with that value, exercise, and then everything flows from there. So instead of just, like Boski said, instead of piecemealing, my colleague's child is doing this, raising money for that, and I got a letter from the food bank, and instead of being reached from all these different directions, having a focused approach is going to be a life changer, I think. So thank you so much for sharing all this great information with us. For our guests, if you'd like to reach out and be connected with Boski or Amelia, you can just contact me at the chamber at info@usicoc.org, and I will be happy to forward your email on to them so they can help you out with any of your individual concerns or needs. Don't forget, we do have the Chamber's annual awards banquet virtually on December 10th. So that's coming right up. You can get your tickets from our website, www.usicoc.org. Once again, I want to thank you guys, Amelia and Boski, so much for your presentation. And then Note to everyone, we are recording this presentation and we're going to be putting it up on YouTube. So if you want to go back and see if you missed any portion of it, or you want to refresh your recollections of it, that will be a great opportunity to do that. So we'll have that up later this month. So at that point, we're going to say thank you, everyone, and have a great day.
Thank you.